I'm trying to make Fable 2 the greatest role-playing game of all time again. This time I've learned from my mistakes.
This is Peter Molyneux, and he may have the reputation of being one of the biggest over-exaggerators in the entire video game industry. Now, one of his biggest claims to fame was founding Lionhead Studios, the studio known for creating the Fable series, but his history of maybe potentially being rather deceptive started well before that. Even since the early days of Lionhead Studios, games like Black and White were anticipated for its ambitious design and lofty promises, only to fall short of what the game actually would have been, which kind of started this pattern of Molyneux seemingly over-promising for games and then under-delivering. This was really evident during the Fable series of games, where he made numerous promises about the game features, such as a dynamic world that would change based on any individual action a player made.
It is a game about you being a hero. It's a role-playing game where you play the role of a hero, and as the game goes on you get more and more famous in the world. But the idea is to have this incredible emergent world where you can kind of do anything you want within a story.
If you want to play a bad guy, you can play a bad guy. If you want to play a good guy, you can play a good guy. It's completely up to you. You know, you're a hero in the game, so you know, you'll see people dressed like you and cut their hair like you cut your hair and had the same beards as your characters got.
2009, alongside the announcement of the Kinect, Project Milo was a big, ambitious game that Molyneux was behind. It was supposed to be this AI interactive simulation featuring a young boy named Milo, and during the demo showcase, it showed Milo interacting with a player in real life, responding in real time to voice commands, recognizing facial expressions, and even interpreting drawings that were handed to him by the user themselves. The technology for Milo seemed incredibly impressive and was meant to represent a significant leap in interactive storytelling and AI.
This is true technology that science fiction has not even written about.
Don't forget your mum's birthday.
And this works today, now.
But here's the thing, some people were a little skeptical as to whether or not this demo was a real, genuine, interactive experience captured, or possibly a scripted out, like tech demo. It was pretty elusive during the early times of this announcement as to what was actually going on with this project. Now, later on it was revealed that this was in fact a tech demo showcasing what the possible capabilities of the Kinect could be, not the realistic ones, and that this was just like an actress and this was all scripted out. In early 2012, after the release of Fable the Journey, a Kinect Fable game, apparently multiple people at Lionhead Studios who had been veterans in the industry and been there for a while ended up quitting, and Molyneux lost it. He started throwing out people immediately and was shouting, lecturing employees and whatnot. We don't know all the details, but the fact that it was publicized and still talked about to this day means that it probably was a really wild day at Lionhead Studios, to say the least. It wouldn't be too long later until Molyneux announced that he was departing from Microsoft and Lionhead Studios in March of 2012, and he stated the decision was motivated by his desire to return to a more hands-on role in game development, and he wanted to pursue new creative opportunities. So what was next for Petey? Well, in 2012, he started a new studio called 22 Cans and released a very interesting game called Curiosity: What's Inside the Cube. Now, this was a phone game app with a simple premise. You have to chip away at this giant cube and find out what is inside by breaking it down enough. It seems like a really simple out there concept, but apparently it was promised the winner of this game, like the first person to reach the core of this cube, whoever was able to do this would discover something that would be a life-changing reward.
I promise you this. It is something incredible, unique, and amazing. And I promise you, whoever it is that finds the middle of it, they will change their lives forever.
That's a pretty big statement. So there was a rush of people who did follow Peter Molyneux during this time trying this game, and people were racing to figure out what this secret reward inside the game was. However, when someone did actually make it to the end, the winner simply got a video of Peter Molyneux in this weird white room talking about how in the next game, it's going to make him a god.
And so, what is in the center is something that only we can grant. And it is the ability to be a digital god.
So, all of this was just a big PR stunt for another game project called Goddess, which we'll talk about here in a second. And essentially the winner would get to be a god in a new game. Not really the life-changing reward that was promised. I think some people thought it'd be some monetary prize or something, not a weird video of Peter.
We are making a game called Goddess.
Goddess was announced, and it was funded through Kickstarter. The game promised to be a revolutionary game where you play as God, and the development was, filled with a bunch of issues. A ton of the promised features were never implemented. It's still in early access 10 years later and probably will never be finished. The Kickstarter went $100,000 over the goal, and even though many people funded their project through Kickstarter, apparently a lot of people never received their rewards either.
Real quick, before Elijah gets into the latest part of PD's journey, there's one more really weird thing that happened between 2021 and 2023 that isn't a straight up lie or anything, but he announced an NFT game centered around owning land and owning buildings and stuff. It's really bizarre, but apparently they managed to raise $54 million for this, and the game released in October 2023, right before he would announce his next project. But there's like thousands of people that invested in this game and lost all their money basically because the NFT market is completely worthless.
This brings us to one of the latest projects that was just announced a couple of months ago, a brand new game called Moat, which is apparently set in Albion, the open world from the Fable universe, which right away brings into question so many legal issues, like he does not have the rights to this. I guarantee he does not have the rights to use the Fable Albion, unless it's a new world also named Albion, but there's like a conflict of interest there. Not too much is known about the game or how the funding is going to work or how this game's actually going to come out and how they're not going to get sued. Our best guess, probably another Kickstarter project, though with the legality of the game set in this universe that they have no rights to, who knows what's actually going to happen with this one. Okay, listen, a lot of times these types of videos wouldn't be possible if we didn't have a sponsor. Fortunately, this week, War Thunder hooked us up, and honestly, War Thunder is the most comprehensive vehicle combat game that's ever been made. In War Thunder, you can play as more than 2,000 different types of vehicles between tanks, planes, helicopters, and ships. It's pretty interesting how this PvP combat involves like this combined arms effort. The vehicles are incredibly detailed and modeled down to their individual components, offering a highly immersive combat experience, and the game is free to play on PC, Xbox, and PlayStation, so why not give it a try? One thing I love about this game is the historical aspect. Like, the vehicles in this game span over the course of 100 years, so you can drive some modern stuff, or you could be like me, checking out all the World War II history while I'm battling it out. There's actually some really cool in-depth customizations for the vehicles. There's hundreds of camouflages, there's historical markings you can place on your machines, and honestly, after just sitting down and playing this game for a bit, I was really excited by how a lot of the interactions work between the different types of vehicles, like how air, ground, and naval vehicles all kind of have their own role to play in the battles. And listen, if you're a brand new player or maybe someone who hasn't played in like 6 months or longer, we got the hookup for you. You can claim a large bonus pack by using our link. It gives you access to multiple premium vehicles, a premium account, and an exclusive 3D decorator for your vehicles, along with some extras. It's only available for a limited time though, so make sure you jump on it. Remember, you can play this game for free on PC, PlayStation, and Xbox. Just make sure you're using our official Rocket Sloth link. That being said, let's go ahead and get back into this topic. Okay, but we can't make a video about the lies in the gaming industry without at least talking about the day before, because this game was absolutely crazy. This game first announced all the way back in 2021, and it was essentially a survival MMO game put together with beautiful visuals, a lot of things that you potentially would be able to do. But man, coming out of an era where games like DayZ and Escape from Tarkov were hugely popular, seeing something that looked really polished, that was taking things a step further and becoming a full-on MMO, this would be huge. Matter of fact, this game garnered so much hype that for a while it was the #1 most wishlist game on the Steam store. But over the course of like the next year or so, some weird oddities started to pop up that made players become more skeptical about what was going on with this game. First, the game was only supposed to release like a year later in 2022, so people were anticipating the game to be pretty far along in development already by the time it was announced. Now, on the developer Fantastic's website, they noted that they were an organization with both volunteer and employed developers working on the game, which is always weird when you hear about volunteer developers. But then Fantastic responded to the skepticism, saying that no, we consider all people working on the game volunteers. Just some of them are paid volunteers and other ones are unpaid volunteers who instead get things like coupons and free codes. In May of 2022, a month before the game was supposed to be released, it got delayed as the studio claimed that they wanted to switch from Unreal Engine 4 to Unreal Engine 5, moving the release date a year down the line. At the beginning of the next year, 2 months before it was supposed to release again, Fantastic announced that the game would be delayed until November for no real reason other than possibly a trademark issue they were running into. At this point, skeptics were really starting to wonder what was going on, whether this game was a scam or some sort of weird stalling tactic, because maybe the game that they showcased in the initial trailer was not at all a reflection of what they were capable of making. There was serious speculation that the game literally did not exist at all. Like, there was no game. And honestly, maybe there really wasn't that much development done on the game and it was nowhere near ready for any type of release. However, finally, in December of this year, just a couple of days ago really, the day before showed up, it released on Steam in early access. It was like $40, and yeah, the game was not good. It was not even remotely close to what was initially promised. Outside of some visuals that look reminiscent from that first trailer, the gameplay was not great. It really wasn't anything actually even in the MMO type category like what was promised. It was more of like a server browsing, regular extraction like shooter with like 1 or 2 zombies every once in a while. The game was riddled in bugs. People finally saw right through the scam that this game was, a simple overhyping, overpromised bait and switch of what they are actually capable of developing. And 4 days after releasing in early access, the studio announced that they were closing down and they would not be able to support the game any further other than just like keeping the servers up. How do you go into early access knowing you're 4 days away from closing? Obviously, you don't have plans to continue to support your game. It's not early access, it's just access that people were paying for. Fortunately enough, Steam seems to have been incredibly lenient with handling the refund situation, with a lot of people getting refunds from their game, and the game has been delisted off of Steam. But man, what a hilarious mess of a game that this ended up being, that actually had a cool idea behind it, but this studio really had no right in promising that they were able or even capable of developing such a game. Okay, we really can't go too much further here without talking about, yes, Ubisoft. Ubisoft definitely hasn't been exempt from maybe making some claims here and there about their game, or more noticeably showcasing presentations and demos of games that are far different from what the game would actually look like at retail. Their track record is pretty big on this, and it's very noticeable when you start looking at things like gameplay trailers and demos from E3 compared to like actual gameplay that would launch with the game. Like, let's look at Rainbow Six Siege from back in the day. They had this like CGI level cutscene that was really cool looking, but it was completely conceptual as to what the gameplay would actually be like, and it simply does not reflect what the real gameplay of Rainbow Six is. Now, back then they were playing on Old House, and I mean, just there's so much stuff in this demo presentation that just wasn't ever in the game. I mean, dropping in on helicopters, hostages begging for help from a drone. I mean, at one point the defending team shoots the hostage and the hostage goes down, and the attackers revive the hostage so they can continue escorting the hostage out. If this happened in a real game, the defenders would lose if the attackers just waited for the hostage to bleed out, but nope, in this demo they're going for the full heals. Also, just in general, the visuals looked way better in this demo than the actual game. Not just lighting and textures, but also a lot of things like the animations of the characters and the effects around things like gunshots and bullets and whatnot. The same thing could be said with the visuals of other games like Watch Dogs, where in the E3 presentation everything looks really realistic, and then you get to the actual game and it just looks kind of generic. I don't know, there's so much detail lost across the versions. But man, Far Cry 4 was very egregious with what they showed off and what actually was in the game. Besides different things like foliage just being completely not in the game in the locations that were shown off in the trailer, so much of the visual and environmental effects that were shown off as like breathtaking graphics were just not at all in the game. Have you ever looked at the Far Cry 3 animations and cutscenes side by side as to what's actually in the game and what's in the trailer? Yeah, Ubisoft. They've been pulling this one for a very long time, it seems. I think they've maybe gotten a little bit better in recent years, especially after a lot of this criticism has come to light, like Crobcat's video where a lot of these comparisons are drawn attention to. But man, was this like a pretty big difference. We can even look at Assassin's Creed Unity, which was hyped up so much by Ubisoft for its launch, as up until that point, Assassin's Creed had a very good track record of good games. Unity set the bar really high, and there was spectacular were presentations shown off for this game, and people were really excited just for the game to release, and it was one of the buggiest games to release of literally all time. Like, even if you were willing to deal with the bugs and whatnot, there was something immersive breaking about trying to get invested in this world and story that literally any little thing could cause the entire game to break into just a barrage of weird occurrences and glitches. Now, fortunately, this game has been touched up over the years, and it's in a much better place nowadays, surprisingly. But man, the jump from the Xbox 360 era to the Xbox One, like PS4 era, was really rough if you were a Ubisoft fan, because it just seemed like there were so many baits and switches around this time that Ubisoft was really just getting away with, and man, it still has hurt their reputation to this day.
Actually, there's another little Ubisoft thing that I wasn't sure if it would count, but I wanted to mention it. In 2005, Ubisoft would release Prince of Persia Revelations for the PlayStation Portable, and 2 years later, they would release Prince of Persia Rival Swords for the PlayStation Portable and the Wii. And just looking at the covers and the names, you're like, oh, these are new Prince of Persia games, but they're actually ports. Yeah, Prince of Persia Revelations was just a port of Warrior Within, and Rival Sword was just a port of Two Thrones. So it's kind of weird to rename the ports of your game for the PlayStation Portable and the Wii, and then just kind of give them new names and different covers. I wonder how many people fell for this back in the day.
One of the biggest blunders, though, of randomly misleading and lying about what is actually going on behind the scenes has to go to Sony with the PlayStation 3. E3 2005 was a wild year. The Xbox 360 was set to release that year, and Sony would be lagging behind with their PlayStation 3 coming out a year later. So Sony really had to pull out all the stops in convincing fans and gamers why they should wait on buying the Xbox 360 for the PlayStation 3, which would be later. And their big gun that they were going to show off was Killzone 2. Now, Killzone's kind of been Sony's, like, quote-unquote attempt at a Halo killer, and Sony showed off this trailer that you're seeing right now, but made the fatal mistake of saying that the footage was running in real time on a PlayStation 3. If you've ever played a PlayStation 3, you would know that, like, gameplay doesn't typically look like this. What really happened was all of the cutscenes and gameplay footage seen in the trailer were, of course, pre-rendered in an engine ahead of time and then just shown as, like, a video. A lot of games do this for trailers and for cutscenes and for concepts, but it is very different to make the claim that this is real-time gameplay versus like a concept trailer as to what they hoped the game would look like when it reached that point in development. Apparently the team at the studio didn't even know that the PlayStation rep would refer to the Killzone footage as running in real time on PS3, and they were shocked. They had only just got their PlayStation 3 development kit and hadn't even started programming anything on there yet. Killzone 2's development actually was originally planned for the PlayStation 2, so they would have to move everything over. Now, there are some discrepancies as to whether or not this trailer represents what their goal graphic level was for the game, or if it was just something thrown out there to try to wow consumers, or a little bit of both. This really probably caused a ton of extra stress, though, to the development team, as now they had to live up to the expectations shown off in the trailer in developing a game that wasn't actually in existence yet.
Now this next one is kind of a lie, but in a good way. Let me explain. Back when Metal Gear 2 Sons of Liberty was announced, there was like a bunch of video material released, a bunch of trailers hyping it up, and all the trailers showed you playing as Snake, who was the main character from the first game, so everybody expected, you know, a continuation of that character's story. And there was even a gameplay demo shown at E3 that showed you playing as Snake. Now, if you actually start the game though, you start off with the demo section where you play as Snake, but shortly after, you play as a completely different character. And at first you're like, huh, you know, maybe I'll just play a level or something as this Raiden guy and then go back to Snake. But no, you're actually Raiden for the rest of the game. So while the marketing material for Metal Gear Solid always showed you playing as Snake, and you know, because of that could be seen as deceiving, I think it was an intentional choice to kind of have this twist of you playing a completely different character. And I mean, Metal Gear Solid 2 is one of the highest regarded games in the franchise, so I think it worked out. It's just kind of funny that it was this marketing lie that kind of led to this moment in the game where you're like, huh, what's going on? Why am I not Snake? But overall, I think it was done for artistic purposes, so I can't be too mad at it.
Okay, and then Fallout 76 was an interesting game to say the least, and I even debated whether or not it should go into this video. For all intents and purposes, Fallout 76 was advertised as a Fallout experience that you could play online with friends, which was a big deal because most Bethesda games aren't typically a co-op experience. Except here's the main problem. When Fallout 76 released, it really wasn't a main Bethesda game. This was something different, something that felt more of a shell of what players had expected. Players fully expected the game to be fleshed out with a world that has all these little details and intricacies like you would find in a game like Fallout 4, for example, and then you'd have this whole multiplayer component to it. Except it seemed like the trade-off was, instead of having an interesting world with interesting characters, you could just like look at other people and run around. Not outright deceptive, other than the one time that Todd said that the game had
16 times the detail
that previous Fallout games had, which, what does that even mean? The game released and it still was full of bugs and just performance issues. It wasn't even polished at that point either, and it was a full-priced game, so I don't know, it was rough. Fallout 76 did get a lot of updates, which did help a little bit in making the game a more enjoyable experience. And ultimately, the game did get closer into being what fans expected. Is this now a good Fallout game? Probably not, but at least it's a better game than what it was at launch, and at least a multiplayer game that has some more things to do than just look at each other nowadays. Back in 2014, there was a Rambo game, and the reveal trailer makes this look like it's going to be an incredible mix of stealth and maybe action like you would see in a Far Cry game. And hey, Rambo is pretty awesome, so this could be a really unique game. But the game was actually just an on-rails shooter game. Not at all what anybody thought it would be. I mean, I guess you could have figured it out with some of the pre-release stuff, but like the way they showed off this game compared to what the gameplay actually ended up playing like was, you know, deceptive to say the least.
The Star Wars lie that kind of happened more recently and was really unfortunate for fans is the cancellation of Star Wars Knights of the Old Republic's cut content DLC on the Switch. This cut content DLC was advertised before the release and was a main reason a lot of people bought the game on the Switch, because, you know, it's kind of cool to get some cut content for a game as old as Knights of the Old Republic 2. Now in June of this year, this DLC was actually cancelled, which caused a bunch of outrage because, you know, as I said, people bought the game on the Switch for the sole reason to get this cut content DLC. What's unfortunate about it is that the developer apparently ran into a bunch of legal issues where the release of that cut content was vetoed by a third party, so they couldn't release it. It is pretty stupid though to advertise it and then not being able to release it because you didn't actually have all the rights to the DLC. You should have probably checked that beforehand.
You know, not too many people actually remember this from back in the day, but after Bungie left Halo to work on Destiny, the release of Destiny 1 actually caused a pretty large number of Bungie fans to kind of fall off across the board. A lot of Halo fans were willing to jump on board and give Destiny a good shot. I mean, even midnight launches for a brand new IP were big, which was rare. But Destiny 1 fell victim to something that Bungie would kind of have to be much more careful with moving forward with their franchise, as overpromising and under-delivering a game would end up hurting their reputation quite a bit. Back in the original reveal for Destiny 1, there's literally the infamous quote of, "If you can see it, you can go to it."
I mean, it's amazing. This is all coming right out of our engine. All that stuff, if you ran out there, it's all playable terrain. I mean, it's just a really powerful new engine that we've got.
This had fans really excited, thinking that this would be this immersive space world where we could go explore anywhere, finally breaking the bounds of individual levels like we had to experience in Halo. We would have complete freedom, except when the game actually released, this really wasn't the case. The game was plagued with out-of-bound boundary markers, making sure you didn't go too far away. A lot of areas you could see in the distance that you couldn't actually access. I mean, people assumed back in the day you'd be able to just traverse from like the tower to the Cosmodrome in just like one simple like journey. No, back then you had to go to orbit if you wanted to go to the tower, which seemed redundant. I mean, we were like right there. Nowadays, a lot of these little features seem commonplace for Destiny because we're used to having to travel that way. But back when they first announced it, they made it seem like exploration would be a big element of the game, though a lot of it ended up getting stripped away. It became more about gameplay loops and individual set pieces and not so much about the actual exploration element. I think this one was forgiven a lot more than some of the other things. I mean, people have bigger bones to pick with Bungie nowadays, but I can't help but to remember some of the original Halo fans that had been loyal to Bungie for years feeling really dissuaded by Destiny 1 on release day. I think one of the biggest instances in recent memory of a game studio changing what was promised and thus infuriating their fan base was probably Activision Blizzard with Overwatch 2. I'll be honest, I'm actually relatively new to Overwatch, so I wasn't actually there when all of this was going down, but I do remember hearing about it. If you're an active Overwatch player, you definitely could not have gone more than a couple of minutes without at least noticing that with Overwatch 2, a lot of players were pretty upset, maybe yourself included. Now, Overwatch 2 was initially announced back in 2019, and fans were actually really optimistic. This was going to be a big overhaul to the existing game that would kind of, allegedly, put players first and be more consumer-friendly for existing players and new players to jump on board. The existing game experience would be the same mostly, with the regular PvP environment that was incredibly popular. Players would get to keep all of their cosmetics that they had unlocked through Overwatch. But that wasn't just it. The game would be put into a brand new engine that would make everything run better, new maps would be added, and there would be a lot of tweaks and fixes overhauling some of the game mechanics to make more fair gameplay across the board. Heck, one of the biggest changes made it where teams were now divided into groups of 5 instead of 6, which changed a big flow of the gameplay. And this probably was the one change that people actually liked out of Overwatch 2 related updates. After that, it just became a train wreck. But the one promise about Overwatch 2 that had fans so excited was the introduction of a campaign mode, something story-based that would put players against enemies and would be a different experience from the regular multiplayer side of things. Overwatch has a huge cast of really charming characters, and a lot of people were interested just because of the way that some of these characters looked, and being able to have a different way to explore this universe was a win for everyone. I mean, if you look at the animated cutscenes that they did to promote the game over the years or new seasons, these things always get a ton of views and are hugely popular, and they build up the story pretty well. So a game tied to these would be amazing. So what happened after this? The following years after the announcement of Overwatch 2, it seemed like with all the attention on development for Overwatch 2, Overwatch 1 was kind of neglected. There weren't a lot of updates or support regularly being put into Overwatch 1, and at least early on in development, the team working on Overwatch 2 seemed to have a lot of time to really flesh out what ideas they wanted to build into this game, though it would probably take a couple of years to fully develop everything. There were some investment documents that leaked in November of 2021 that reported that the game would be delayed to likely 2023, and maybe because of some backlash internally or financially from the higher ups, the decision was made to merge Overwatch 1 and 2 together to have a single product and migrate things over to the new engine, and then release updates in parts for what Overwatch 2 was supposed to be. Now, this tied to the jump to free-to-play kind of gave Blizzard, I guess, enough confidence that this could be a big successful launch because they would get an influx of new players at launch. Also, a lot of the creatives who had been working on Overwatch for years ended up leaving Blizzard during this time, likely due to conflicts happening internally. So, plans change, and oddly enough, Overwatch 2 would release without the campaign, which was the whole point of Overwatch 2 being made in the first place. So, the PvP portion of the game would be released in a beta starting in April back in 2002, and players would just have to wait for the PvE stuff to come at some point. Now, the plans for the campaign experiences were now shifted to be released on seasonal schedules, and they would all stay available so people would eventually be able to go through and play all of the previous campaign levels that were released and have a campaign experience. Also, you'd be able to unlock things like experience points in the campaign that they could use for their hero to unlock new passive abilities, which would be introduced as talents. However, after all of this and years of development, in May of this year, 2023, it was announced that the extensive plans for this PvE mode were scrapped. That's it. They were worried it would impact the PvP elements of the game. Instead, the developers were going to try to offer story-based events as a replacement for the scrapped PvE, and they would be tied into some other stuff alongside another canceled game. And instead, there would be some sort of stories released, but they would require players to pay $15 for the story missions. So this was kind of like the last nail in the coffin. On day one of Overwatch 2, players are already asking, why is Overwatch 2 a thing? It's just a glorified update. There's maps from the old game that are now at night, and I guess 5 players is neat. There were a lot of characters that were disabled due to few glitches or whatever, and some reworks that were kind of broken. But I mean, this wasn't anything crazier than like a big season update for another live service game out there. Free to play is cool for people who didn't already own Overwatch, but the people who had Overwatch were kind of scratching their heads as to what was going on. There was no story, which was like the biggest, most hyped up part of Overwatch 2. This is something people wanted for a long time, and there's still room for a great story there. One of the craziest launches of all time, where it became apparent very quickly after the launch that the game isn't what it was promised to be, was No Man's Sky. You can't hate on No Man's Sky too much nowadays because the game did evolve into a much, much better game than it was day one. So nowadays, what we know and where we know the game ended up going, you can be a little more forgiving. But man, when they announced this game, it was like the biggest deal. It was supposed to be a revolutionary game. There were so many awards that the game won, as in winning for being a good presentation at E3. People thought that this was the turn of gaming forever, and that this would be the future right here, starting with No Man's Sky. And then the game came out, and there really wasn't too much to do in the game. I mean, you could fly to a planet, look around, gather some resources, and then go somewhere else. The studio, they did have a vision for where they wanted the game to be one day, and fortunately, they did build the game into mostly that. But man, the amount of press that they did leading up to the game's release completely misguided consumers and misled so many players into what experience they would be having. One big example, of course, is the multiplayer aspect of the game. Now, it was said over and over again by Sean Murray, one of the founders and leads on the game, that multiplayer is possible, but because of the scope of their world, interacting and fighting another player would be pretty uncommon. But when it did happen or would happen, it would be a special moment. He even mentioned that it would be almost something like you would see out of a game like Dark Souls or Journey. But once again, iterating, it would be really rare for players to meet each other, especially after launch. But it's in there. Multiplayer is definitely in there.
Will you be able to play with your friends?
Yeah.
Can you run into other people, other players on the game?
Yes, but the chances of that are incredibly rare, just because of the size of what we're building.
But then, believe it or not, day one, 2 players found themselves on the same exact location on the same planet, and they were streaming side by side. You can see the locations are literally the exact same. They were in the same exact spot, and there was no indication of another player. There was no multiplayer in the game. Okay, whatever. Sean Murray even went ahead and tweeted, guys, it's not a multiplayer game. Don't come to No Man's Sky expecting to be a multiplayer game. While this contradicted everything he had said before, interestingly enough, on some of the boxes of the game, the label had multiplayer on there, and somewhere after the game went gold, they just put a sticker on top of it with a new label, updating it, removing the online component from the box. If you peel the sticker back, boom, it tells you online. This is just like one example of like the promises that didn't lead up to actually being in the game. But once again, there has been a lot of support for this game over the years. More support than so many other games that just like drop off after a year of the game being out. So credit there at least. Another very similar instance is Cyberpunk 2077, a game that literally launched in a not great state, and then one where there were rumors that the team at Cyberpunk was planning on trying to make a quote-unquote No Man's Sky level comeback, and I would say as of 2023, they successfully pulled off that comeback. Now, to be fair, Cyberpunk set themselves up in a pretty bad spot ahead of time when they released like a 48-minute trailer that showcased a ton of features that never ended up being in the game.
Here, a generic ad has morphed into an advertisement specifically tailored to V, informing her of the nearest vendor she can purchase the product.
Character creators where you pick your unique backstory and who you looked up to as a hero. I mean, the first trailer had this really cool train ride. You got to see Night City. The visuals that were shown off in some of the trailers looked incredible, even if they're pre-rendered. And then the game released in a really buggy state, and sure, with RPG games, you can forgive some of that, but it was really unforgiving for the players who were struggling with the performance side of things. And it really depended on what platform you were on, whether you were on the last gen Xbox One and PS4, the next gen systems, or if you're on PC with specific hardware setups. Now, moving forward with the big fixes, they stopped supporting the last gen hardware, but technically when Cyberpunk 2077 released, they were selling special edition Xbox One X's with the Cyberpunk aesthetic on it. So like the expectation that the game would run somewhat well on those consoles was fairly there. There was just a whole lot of things that were shown off about this game that weren't there when the game released. Like we mentioned earlier, this game also has has seen a pretty big comeback with the 2.0 update really fixing a lot of the main problems that the game had, adding in a ton of new features and overhauling some of the features that just didn't work that well in the original release. And then there was even a surprise update just recently with 2.1, which added in a couple of the big features that were initially shown off way back in the day, like the train system is now functioning in the game. You can actually ride the trains, which people thought would never actually get implemented. I'm not justifying either of these two games lying to the larger world about what their game was truly like, but every once in a while, when a game just misleads their audiences, sometimes a few of these studios will pull themselves up by their bootstraps and turn it around and make a good game experience eventually, which, while it's not perfect, it is better than just like abandoning their game 4 days after launch.
And while we already talked about big companies like Ubisoft or Bethesda or Activision, another big company that got caught lying and deceiving people over the years has been EA. Back when SimCity 2013 came out, there was a bunch of server issues. People just weren't able to connect and play the game, and that was partly because of the always online requirement to play the game. Now, when all these server issues happened, EA responded saying that they offload a significant amount of the calculations to their servers, and it would take a significant amount of engineering work to rewrite the game to function as a single player game in an offline environment. Now, if that claim is true, maybe it's got some merit to it, but it still doesn't excuse the game launching in the state where people couldn't play a single player game because they had to be online. But just a few days after EA made this claim, there was reports that an insider at Maxis, the SimCity developer, actually told them otherwise. This anonymous developer explained that the servers are just doing stuff like sending messages between players and cities and doing things like cloud storage, but they don't actually do any of the computing that the game does. That's all locally on the person's computer, which that makes total sense. But it also contradicts directly the statement EA had made. And then a year later, they did actually release an offline mode for SimCity, so it was possible all along. But there's another time that I can remember that EA lied to its players, and this time that lie actually faced a lawsuit. In 2011, during the PlayStation E3 conference, it was announced that Battlefield 3 would include Battlefield 1943 for all PlayStation players.
EA is using the extra storage capacity of Blu-ray to add a second game, Battlefield 1943, to the disc. That gives PlayStation owners one of the most exciting games of the year, bundled free with one of the most popular games offered on the PlayStation Network.
Now, when Battlefield 3 came out, there was no Battlefield 1943. It just wasn't there. And people were confused because they straight up promised this game to be included and then it was nowhere to be found. Now, after the game released, they did announce that PlayStation players would get early access to purchase Battlefield 3 DLC, which is such a weird replacement for a free game. Because now all they got was the chance to buy some DLC early, which like, okay. And after a while, there was a class action lawsuit filed against EA, and I have no idea whatever came of that. And I'm pretty sure Battlefield 1943 shut down a couple days ago. So I wonder if the PlayStation players ever got their free copy of their game. Also, another little stunt that EA pulled back in 2008 was promoting PGA Tour 09 for the Wii, but using Xbox 360 footage in the trailer. Yes, this was straight up showing Wiimote gameplay, but Xbox 360 footage. EA would even respond to this, saying that the Wii footage was not of broadcasting quality, and that's why they used the 360 footage, which is a crazy statement to make about your game.
Man, Mighty No. 9 also was another kind of mess of a game, and this one hurts a little worse because it was started as a Kickstarter game, so it's like directly fans funding this project, and honestly, Mighty No. 9 looked really promising, except the game wasn't all that good, and there was some interesting decisions used with the money that was raised through Kickstarter, things that weren't originally laid out. Like, the team working on Mighty No. 9 decided to allocate some of the funds that they made from Kickstarter to greenlighting an anime? What is going on here? Then Mighty No. 9 would release and the game would be, pretty bad and disappointing for a lot of fans across the board. I don't know if we can go too much further in this video without at least talking about Call of Duty some way, somehow. And this year's Call of Duty is more interesting than other years because Modern Warfare 3 was, interesting. Sledgehammer Games actually went as far as saying that Call of Duty Modern Warfare 3 is the first true sequel in the Call of Duty franchise. How? This is the second Modern Warfare 3, let alone not even the first true sequel. Or what defines a sequel at that point? Are they deciding what a sequel means?
I mean, they must have their own definition of what a sequel truly is, because, I mean, if this is the first true sequel, I don't know what Modern Warfare 2, Modern Warfare 3, Black Ops 2, Black Ops 3 was, you know, or any of those games.
I just feel like it's so, like, I don't know, tone deaf, because Modern Warfare 3 has a lot of criticism right now, and just to, like, I don't know, be like, we can't hear the criticism. We're the first true sequel. We're doing things different. It comes across as a little bit goofy.
Out of touch.
Yeah, out of touch. I mean, yes, it's the first game to have like carryover progression, I guess. But I mean, I don't think that like rules in and out what a sequel is. So it just, that one felt very weird.
A sequel to me is always based on the story. I mean, why weren't the other stories that they did before were sequels too? Like, why is this one so different? Just because the guns carry over multiplayer? That's crazy, dude. That's nothing to do with the sequel. It's just some content that they recycled.
Right, and even if, like, it was a different story, which it's not, it is a sequel story, if the tone was similar enough, then you could argue, like, yeah, it's a sequel in that regard. But, I mean, the other Call of Duty games have shared tone across the board there, and that doesn't disqualify it. So it becomes a confusing mess after a while.
Right, and also the other thing they said is that this game did a full cycle of development, like full 3 years, and that they were laser focused in. But there's credible reports that that's also a lie. There's reports that it was made in 15 months or 16 months.
Hey, do you remember the BioShock Infinite trailer when the first initial reveal trailer went out there?
Yeah, actually, I thought it looked pretty good when I first saw it, and I was hyped for the game. But after playing the game, it was nothing like it. And I think that is an issue of showing off your game too early. The whole trailer doesn't make any sense after you play the game anymore.
Is BioShock Infinite still good? I haven't gotten around to BioShock yet.
Yeah, BioShock Infinite is still very good, but that trailer is definitely nothing like the story.
It's just like out there compared, yeah.
But I'm pretty sure this one was just a case of they showed off the trailer too early, and then during development the game completely changed, like in the story and like what the story beats they're hitting, and this trailer kind of just doesn't fit the game anymore.
I've heard a lot about the BioShock Infinite trailer kind of being one of those bait and switch type ones that did roll out too early. Do you think other trailers like Dead Island should count as that also? Because if you remember the first Dead Island reveal trailer, it's like this narrative heavy, hit you right in the feels type of trailer. Like people were trying to figure out what's going on in it because it had this like weird thing going on with like time orientation and like this family aspect of zombies. And then the game, it takes place on an island. That's the only real similarities, and there's zombies.
I mean, honestly, like the first trailer was like emotional, and you were like thinking about all these like interesting settings that like the zombie outbreak on this vacation island could bring upon them. But like at the end of the game, the story was pretty basic, and I don't think the family is in the game, right?
There's like a Easter egg of the family that you can see at the very beginning of the game, like in the hotel room. That's it. I thought there was gonna be like narrative decisions that you had to face, like that were hard, like heart-wrenching, and no, it's like a zombie game. You just play through it. There's not even really that much as a story.
I mean, they kind of did something similar with the second one, right? Like the second trailer that was like, I don't know, came out in 2014. Game came out this year, last year. You know, it took like 8 years afterwards to develop the game, at least, and the trailer is also nothing like the game. It's just some dude jogging. Like, what does that have to do with the game? Maybe that's just their style. Who knows?
Yeah, I guess that one's a little different because they had to like restart development, I guess, a couple of times in there probably. But they also did the emotional thing for Dead Island Riptide, that like in between game.
Oh, I didn't know that.
Yeah, it's weird. I know when you go back to review this part in the video, you'll get a chance to see it. But yeah, it was like another one of those like emotional type trailers. And it wasn't as impactful because I think we already knew what they were doing because they just did it with the last game. But obviously they pulled it out again for the next one.
I kind of like fool me once, shame on me or something. I don't know.
Yeah, whatever the saying is. Fool me twice and then I'll buy the game.
Okay, you know what's crazy? When Crackdown 3 was shown off, they showed this in-depth destruction, like all these walls and all these buildings you can destroy. They had like the pixel perfect bullet holes. You could like take down a concrete wall just with bullet holes, right? And it would fall apart.
Like that real-time destruction.
Yeah, they promised all this like construction. I think it was supposed to be like cloud rendered or cloud based like computing, so it like could be run on the Xbox One. That was the idea, right? Take like the load times and all the computing off the Xbox One, put it on the cloud. But when the game released, nothing of that was there. The destruction was so basic.
I remember them talking and hyping up Crackdown 3 that there was going to be like these real-time effects to the things that were altered in the world. And then didn't they restrict it where like multiplayer would have some level of like saving the destruction, and then the campaign would have other levels of it, and it wasn't like equal across the board.
Right.
And that was like after years of the game getting delayed over and over again, I don't think the technology really was there for them to be promising that level of stuff.
They definitely jumped the gun. And I mean, I don't know. Maybe it's hard to tell at the time when they're sitting there announcing this. I guess they don't know the game is gonna be delayed for years and years. But it just seems kind of weird that really the difference is so jarring in what was promised and what was delivered.
Okay, Luke, the Wii U. What a great system. We both were Wii U enjoyers.
Yeah, I was a Wii U connoisseur.
Right, I know. You play the Wii U still every once in a while, don't you?
I mean, it is sitting in my living room.
Is it actually?
It is actually sitting by my TV right now. So.
But you don't have 2 gamepads, do you?
No, sadly, I only have 1.
Nintendo got us there. They promised, or they said at one point, that there was supposed to be the ability to have 2 gamepads connected to the Wii U.
And I'm happy to announce, just like the original Nintendo Entertainment System, the Wii U hardware will support 2 separate gamepads.
And that was never implemented. There's no function or features related to having 2 gamepads playing at the same time.
And last year, actually, Reggie was asked about this.
Was he really?
Yeah, he was straight up asked, like, you know, you kind of said this was going to be possible. Why wasn't it possible? And his explanation was actually kind of sad. He was like, yeah, it would have been possible in theory, but no game developer wanted to even go there to use 2 gamepads. So there was no games ever considered for development for 2 gamepads. So it just never materialized because there was no need for them.
I wonder if you're able to actually, like, can you connect the gamepad and still use it as like a regular, like, Wii controller? Or is that...
I have no idea. The thing is, the gamepad was the console, so you wouldn't just, like, bring the gamepad without the console, you know what I mean? Like,
well, the gamepad was part of the console, right?
Right, but, like, they were so tied together. I don't know.
Right, I guess it'd be weird to, like, take it away from the console, because then you can't do much without the Wii U.
Also, the limited amount of people I knew that had the Wii U, who's gonna have a second gamepad? Like, I'm the only person in Germany that bought a Wii U at the time, you know what I mean?
I was in college freshman year when I had the Wii U. I was the only person, I think, in the whole building, maybe the whole campus, that was living in the dorms. Yeah, like, nobody had the Wii U. It was a interesting time. But it was very popular when Mario Kart came out, so...
Do you remember when they announced Project Scarlet, like the next generation of Xbox consoles, and they talked about how there was gonna be basically no more load times?
Dude, I love that trailer. Play that one part of the trailer right there.
And the fake elevator, because you know that the game's loading in the background. It's just an elevator ride forever.
That's our goal with gaming, is that you don't have those pauses.
Okay, I love that line, where it talks about, like, how the elevators will be gone because... they're, like, used in games for load segments. I think it was really goofy, that whole presentation, where very obviously, like, the technology was still being, like, created, and they were optimistic for what game developers might choose to do with the stronger hardware. But to think that they're going to, like, fully redecide or restart the way that they typically plan and develop games was a very bold claim to make, because I do think, like, the way that games are made, like, loading sequences and sections are considered pretty early on in development. So I do think it was funny how they thought that maybe there'd just be no load times, and nowadays we're literally playing on the Xbox Series X, Series S, using that hardware that they talked about, and there's load times. There's load screens in most of their first party games. Look at Starfield. Look at Halo Infinite. I mean, we have to sit there loading. It's not that big of a deal, but it's an interesting thing to, like, kind of allude to during that presentation back then.
Also, that reminds me that one time Bill Gates said that the original Xbox was gonna have, like, the same render quality and, you know, graphics as Toy Story 2 at the time, which is a crazy statement to make because Toy Story 2 was a pre-rendered movie and not a console, you know what I mean?
Dude, maybe he was just really optimistic about the Xbox and what it would actually be capable of.
Yeah, maybe the presence of The Rock, you know, got him high hopes, and he went a little out there and made the statement.
Dude, maybe he watched Toy Story 2 on, like, a really bad CRT television and thought that that's what the Xbox would look like in the corner. I don't know.
You know, that's a fair point. Maybe a setup sucked, yeah.
Yeah, I mean, it could have been anything. Remember The Matrix 3?
Wait, was that Reloaded?
The one with the fight scene with all of the dudes. I don't know why that popped in my head. I just want to know if you remember the movie.
I mean, I don't.
You don't know what I'm talking? Wait, you hate The Matrix, don't you?
I do. I'm not a Matrix fan. I've watched the Matrix movies for like 10 minutes each and then turn them off.
Okay, so I think it's the third Matrix. There's like this big ultimate fight, and I guess they thought that they could do way more with like the technology that they had, but they definitely didn't have the technology. So now when you go watch the movie, like the fight scene is very, very obvious, like the CGI like best they could do with a very high budget at that time, instead of what they had originally envisioned. And like it just, some people think it's goofy nowadays. It just popped in my head when we talked about Toy Story. It has nothing to do with the video game stuff, but you know what? Leave it in. We'll just leave it in.
Back in the day, during the PS3 launch or like early days, I think the president of Sony said that the PS3 could hit 120 FPS at the time. I think this was 2005, so the PS3 was not out yet?
Yeah, just a year before.
Okay, it was before, okay. I see. But yeah, obviously, I don't think anyone had a 100 FPS TV in his house or a 100 FPS monitor to play the PS3, even if it was possible.
I don't think 120 FPS or hertz like TV screens existed, or if they were very, very rare back then.
I mean, yeah, there might have been like a scientific like thing or something, but I don't think like a consumer grade product on the market, or definitely not. I don't know, when did people even switch to 60 hertz? Like, I feel like, 2005 they might have been running 30 hertz.
I have a friend who we played Xbox with not too long ago, actually, and we found out that their television wasn't even 60 hertz. They might have been playing at 24 hertz.
That's a crazy.
I mean, it's old TV, but yeah, no, I never realized like frame rates and refresh rates were even married for a really long time. So I never really thought too much about it. And I wonder how many people out there buy consoles that are advertised like 120 frames per second, but they like their monitor literally is just capped at 60. Because I feel like most monitors are capped at 60 unless you're explicitly looking to buy like a high-end screen that goes higher than 60.
There's still a lot of 60 hertz monitors around, and every now and then I see a 30 hertz monitor in sale. I'm like, whew.
We should try to find the lowest refresh rate monitor and then like play a game on it.
Okay. Like a 1 hertz monitor?
I'm sure there's 1 hertz monitors, but that might be like a little excessive, but like just something that's actually like retailed on the market.
Okay, I mean, let's just walk into a Best Buy.
Tell them we're looking to like experience like the old style of art, and we want like a hertz a refresh rate that's low enough.
I mean, I honestly, like, when I play something on 60 FPS, I already get, like, I question everything. I'm like, I can't play this.
Dude, you didn't play Starfield on Xbox like I did, dude. That was, like, a period of having to adapt, I will say. Like, as much as I enjoyed the story and the campaign of Starfield, the 30 FPS locked was it was a big change. It took some getting used to.
Yeah, it definitely feels jarring after you're like used to all this.
Yeah, and the gunplay, it made the gunplay, I think, for a lot of people feel worse than what they had improved the gunplay to be like. Because I don't know, I feel like gunplay you need to have kind of like buttery smooth.
That's why the high-end FPS games, like the competitive games, all are about like refresh rate and FPS you get, you know what I mean? Because it makes the game feel buttery smooth.
Heck yeah. Dude, this video was fun to make. I feel good about this one. How do you feel about it?
Yeah, I feel good, dude. Hopefully,
cool.
This one will go viral, as the kids say.
We can pay some bills. With all that being said, huge shout out to War Thunder for sponsoring this video. Once again, check out the link in the description, and don't forget to claim your bonus pack. Also, once again, guys, thanks so much for all the support on this channel. All of our patrons who supported us, we really appreciate you. You can see their names on the screen now. If you want to support us on Patreon by just donating a few bucks our way, you help keep our channel going, and that's really cool too. Otherwise, if you're new, a subscription goes a long way. Thanks so much for watching. We'll see you all next time with a brand new video.